over to another surah. I already have something in mind. The whole point of doing this in the beginning was I spoke to our Imam, Sheikh Junaid, and we always say, in our khutbahs and everything, that you need to connect with the Quran, you need to connect with the Quran. But we were thinking about what are we doing to actually give people an avenue for that, and this is that. So one person comes, 100 people come, we'll try to keep this going, inshallah. So after Surah Najm, it'll be another one, and we'll keep going like that, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq. So going through this, as we start, so as usual, this is our WhatsApp group. If you join it, I send the PowerPoints there, I send reminders, and what I've started doing is I think it's more beneficial if I send the PowerPoint before. So everybody, if you're in the group, you should have the PowerPoint for today already, if you got a chance to look through it. So now where we are, subhanAllah, like I said, we're starting the end part of the surah. Last week we started that final part. So we've covered quite a bit already. In the beginning, we talked about how it talks about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Isra, Mi'raj. It attacks the beliefs of the Quraysh, Lat and Uzza. We talked about accountability and justice. We spoke at length about that last week, about personal effort, and that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looks at. And today, subhanAllah, we're going to go into this last section, and eventually the conclusion of the surah. So quick review from last week. Last week we started from here. So before this was أَفَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي تَوَلَّى وَأَعْطَى قَلِيلًا وَأَكْدَى. Do you see the one who turns away? And we said this is Walid ibn Mughira, but also it can be generalized like we spoke about. أَعِنْدَهُ عِلْمُ الْغَيْبِ فَهُوَ يَرَى. Does he have some knowledge of the unseen that he sees, so he knows everything? أَمْ لَمْ يُنَبَّأْ بِمَا فِي صُحُفِ مُوسَى. Or did what was in the scrolls of Musa alayhi salam, did it never reach him? وَإِبْرَاهِيمَ الَّذِي وَفَّى. And what was in the scrolls of Ibrahim, did that never reach him either? And what was in the scroll? So the rest of the surah, so not the rest of the surah, the rest of the section is what was in that scroll. The first thing, أَلَّا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةُ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى. No one person is going to bear the burden of anybody else. That's the core that was always there, from Ibrahim alayhi salam to Musa alayhi salam, and now with Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And then وَأَن لَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. That mankind will not have a single thing except what he puts his effort towards. And we spoke about how in this dunya, what matters is the end result. But here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, end result, leave it to Allah. What matters is your effort. And whatever that effort is, وَأَنَّ سَعْيَهُ سَوْفَ يُرَى. That effort will be shown. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we spoke about on the Day of Judgment, when He's happy with you, He's going to show your efforts to everybody else. Not your end result, but your efforts. So that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking at. ثُمَّ يُجْزَاهُ الْجَزَاءَ الْأَوْفَى. And then He will get the complete reward. And that brings us to today, inshallah. So the next ayah, beautiful ayah, because if you think about it, we spoke a little bit last week about as we're ending, what you're going to see is a lot of things are connecting back to the beginning and connecting back to earlier in the surah. Because every surah, of course the Quran is a whole, every surah on its own is a complete unit. So as the surah wraps up, it starts almost forming shells around itself. And as we start the conclusion of this surah, what is this? وَأَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى. The ending is with your Lord. So the surah is ending, the ending section of the surah, and it's talking about our ending as well. وَأَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى. And to your Lord alone is the ultimate return. The Arabic, very quickly, we actually know all of these. So let's see, وَأَنَّ. And indeed would be وَإِنَّ, very close. Anna means that, right? So وَأَنَّ is and that. إِلَىٰ, two. رَبِّكَ, that's easy. Your Lord. Anybody remember this one? Al-Muntaha, when did we do it? Sidratil Muntaha, mashallah. So look, even in the same exact word, we did it in the beginning, and now it's coming back to us in the end. Muntaha meant the utmost limit. عند Sidratil Muntaha, عندها جنة المأوى. We did it like almost 2 months ago now. Al-Muntaha is the final ending. There's nothing else after that. When we spoke about Sidratil Muntaha, we said beyond that tree there's no more human understanding. And this is the same word being used. وَأَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى. Okay, so وَأَنَّ, and that. One way to see this is this was also in the scrolls of Musa and Ibrahim alayhi salam. أَمْ لَمْ يُنَبَّأْ بِمَا فِي صُحُفِ Musa. So you can take it as that, or you can take it independently as speaking to the Prophet. Either way, this is a core principle for Musa alayhi salam, for Ibrahim alayhi salam, and of course for Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And the way you can connect this back is, we said, أَمْ لَمْ يُنَبَّأْ بِمَا فِي صُحُفِ Musa. Does he not know what's in the scrolls of Musa? And the way you would read this, at least the way the idea is would be, أَمْ لَمْ يُنَبَّأْ أَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى. Does he not know that the final destination is with your Lord? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking about this person that's turning away from this, turning away from the Quran, turning away from the message, turning away from the Prophet. And he's asking, does this person not know? أَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى. Does he not know that all the ending is with me? Does he not even know that? The final destination, of course, the general meaning of this is al-muntaha is that utmost return. It's usually used for when you're walking. If somebody's walking on a road, if somebody's on a road to somewhere, and that end goal is al-muntaha. So whether you realize it or not, if you're walking on that road, as all of us are, whether you're Muslim or not Muslim, al-muntaha is with ila rabbik, is with your Lord, right? Al-muntaha is the ending of a journey. Similarly, we're also ending our journey with the surah. Right, we're almost finished with our journey with the surah, at least as far as we're studying right now. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even uses that to connect to us. وَأَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى. This surah is starting to end, and your ending is also coming, and it's going to be with your Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sidratul Muntaha. We talked about this a little bit already. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that in the beginning. So you're going to see again and again, something comes up at the ending, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ties it back to the beginning. We talked about Sidratul Muntaha in paradise, and that Muntaha is being talked about again now. If you live your life the correct way, you'll get that, inshallah. وَأَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى. This is hope for some people, especially in this context. It's hope for some people that no matter what I'm going through in life, my Lord is where my final destination is. In this place, it says specifically, وَأَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ, and indeed to your Lord. So directly it's talking to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if you think about it, at this time he's going through so much. His believers, the people that believe in him are being tortured. All this madness is happening around him. His own family is turning away. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is consoling him. وَأَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى. You're going to come back to me. At the same time, the Walid ibn Mughira that are rejecting him, that see the truth but are still rejecting him, it's a warning. وَأَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى. That the ending is still with me, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we said this, your Lord, the ayah right before was speaking in third person. Now all of a sudden it shifts, and we've seen this in a couple of places in this surah. So this could be talking to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam first. And one of the beautiful things about this, in the very beginning of the surah, we spoke about Isra and Mi'raj, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam up near the Sidratul Muntaha, and he's seeing all these amazing things. We say he spoke to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then he comes back here. Now any one of us, if we went on a journey, anything close to that, maybe for us the closest example can be if you go to Umrah, and you go there and you're in Masjid al-Nabawi, you're in Masjid al-Haram, and you feel so nice, then you come back here, and you're like, man, I want to go back. So if you feel like that going to just Umrah, imagine how the Prophet ﷺ felt going on Mi'raj and speaking to Allah. And now at the end of the surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't worry, you're going to come back to me. وَأَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى. He's consoling his Prophet that soon you're going to come and we're going to speak again. SubhanAllah. And it's also speaking about, last week we spent so much time speaking about effort. وَأَن لَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. So somebody is trying their best, things aren't working out. Maybe there's goals that you have and you're really trying, but it's not working out. Whether it's religiously, whether it's financially, your family, you're putting in the work, but it's just not happening. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is consoling that person. وَأَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى. Keep putting in that work. وَأَن لَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. As long as that effort is there, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is where the final return is. It's consolation for all of us. Everybody's efforts are different, right? Last week we spoke about in Surah Al-Layl, وَإِنَّ سَعْيَكُمْ لَشَتَّى, that everybody's efforts are different. Some people are trying very hard for one thing, some people are trying for another. But regardless of all those efforts, they all come and merge at that final spot. وَأَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى. So that was the general meaning of this verse. And the tafasir talk about a little bit more of an abstract meaning as well. And this is the first one, that the ending is of course literal, as in all of our end is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's also figurative, in that when you're thinking, the end of your thought is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One way to understand this is if anybody sits and thinks about the world around them, sits and thinks about why we're actually here, but necessarily they will come to the conclusion at the end of that thinking that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is real, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists and He is our creator. So that final destination of somebody's thought, somebody of a sound mind, will be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا ذكر الله تعالى فانتهي, that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioned, فانتهي, then stop. When Allah is mentioned, then stop. And the context of this is Allah. He said that one of you thinks, one of you looks at something, meaning us, and we see a tree and we say, who made this tree? And we keep going, who made this, who made this? And eventually we get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then shaitan comes to you and tells you the obvious question, sometimes our kids ask, well then where did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala come from? And that's where the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, that's where you stop. Because that muntaha, that end limit is also of your mind. Because when you get to your Rabb, your mind can't comprehend that anymore. So to your Lord is the literal ending, but also your mental ending is with your Lord. And when you get to that point, you can't contemplate that anymore. You can't encompass with your mind Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can't do that. So that's where you stop. And that was the advice of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it's not just our literal ending, but also the end of any human logic, anything that applies, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is where that ends, right? Another way to take it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the final say. وَأَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى. If I want to do something and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said clearly that something else should be done, then my ending is there. I'm not going to argue anymore. There's nothing else in there for me. I'm just going to do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. And then we move on to وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَضْحَكَ وَأَبْكَى. One thing I want to point out, if you just listen, as we've been studying the surah, and actually today in Maghrib, not on purpose, I just happened to have these in my mind, so that's what we recited. It even sounds different now. وَالنَّجْمِ إِذَا هَوَى مَا ضَلَّ صَاحِبُكُمْ وَمَا غَوَى. It sounded one way, right? Then we went to الَّذِينَ يَجْتَنِبُونَ كَبَائِرَ الْإِثْمِ. It sounds a little bit different. When we go to that ending, all these verses get smaller. And every single one starts with وَأَنَّ وَأَنَّ وَأَنَّ. And when you just hear it, right? And imagine what we said in the beginning. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is in this marketplace standing up, reciting this to the Quraysh that don't even believe in him. And what they're hearing now is this shift in even how it sounds. And it's again, وَأَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَضْحَكَ. Again, وَأَنَّ وَأَنَّ. It's like a hammer just beating down. Just short ayahs, each one packed with meaning. And before you can even think fully about it, the next one hits. And this is how the surah is ending. And we'll see how it ends with the sajda. And everybody had to make sajda, even the non-Muslims, because they couldn't help themselves. In any case, وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَضْحَكَ وَأَبْكَى. And he is the one who makes people laugh, and he's the one who makes people weep, subhanAllah. So why this? All of a sudden, we're talking about all these different things, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts in laughter and weeping. So very quickly, وَأَنَّهُ, we did this already. Huwa is he. One thing I want us to notice is if this sentence said وَأَنَّهُ أَضْحَكَ وَأَبْكَى, it would be a complete sentence. It would mean, and indeed he makes laugh and he makes weep. The huwa here is extra. It's for emphasis, and we'll talk about why. أضحك means to make somebody laugh, and abka is to make somebody cry. So ضحك means to laugh, baka means to cry, and when you put it in this form, it means to make somebody else do it. But in any case, وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَضْحَكَ وَأَبْكَى. He is the one that makes you laugh and cry. Laughing and crying are the two extremes of the two emotions that we have. That means every emotion that we have in the middle, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that's making us feel that. Any situation that makes us feel that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one behind that emotion. We spend all this time talking about the hereafter, وَأَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى, and then even before that, ثُمَّ يُجْزَاهُ الْجَزَاءَ الْأَوْفَى. And now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is shifting to the dunya. Every single emotion you experience in this dunya is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is making you feel all that. This is very interesting. So one thing that everybody, not just Muslims, debate is what makes humans humans, right? You have so many different animals. You have, people like Darwinists that say that there really isn't anything that makes us any different. What is it that makes humans unique? So I want everybody to take a look at this. This is from Discover magazine, and it's not even that old. August 19, 2021. Humans are the only animals that cry, and we don't know why. To this day, we don't know why are humans laughing and why are humans crying. And not only that, we are unique in this. No other animal laughs and cries. There's some animals that laugh, and subhanAllah, even in the tafsir that I read for this, hundreds of years ago, they even said that some animals laugh and some cry, but none of them do both. So he gave an example like monkeys, they laugh. You probably see that on like Nature or whatever. And they said some animals cry, like camels, they can cry. That's what it says in the tafsir. But no animal combines both except humans. I started looking into a little bit of this for this week. And now with the research now, they say no, animals actually don't It's not that one laughs and one cries. No animal cries, because when we cry, it's associated with some hormones that get released in our blood and makes us feel a certain way or whatever it is. These animals don't have that. Their crying doesn't fulfill the same purpose. So humans are the only ones that cry, and how you feel when you cry, no other animal in creation experiences that. وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَضْحَكَ وَأَبْكَى. 2021, humans are the only beings that cry. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala moves from talking to the akhirah, and He highlights these two things that make us human before any of this even was being contemplated about. وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَضْحَكَ وَأَبْكَى. This is a beautiful line from one of the tafasir, ذهب الوسائط, that all the intermediaries are now removed. We talked about أَفَرَأَيْتُمُ اللَّاتَ وَالْعُزَّى. Have you seen Lat? Have you seen Uzza? Have you seen these idols? We talked about all that in the beginning of the surah. وَبَقِيَتِ الْحَقَائِقِ. And the only thing that's left now is Allah, the haqq, the truth. So this surah has covered why everything else is wrong. But now all that's left to talk about is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَتَعَالَى فَلَا فَاعِلَ إِلَّا هُ. And most elevated is He. There is nobody that does except Him. فَلَا فَاعِلَ إِلَّا هُ. So everybody that does something, there's none of these intermediaries are doing anything. It's only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the purpose of that huwa. It's that emphasis. وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَضْحَكَ وَأَبْكَى. He is the only one. Not these idols, not these situations, nothing else. He's the only one that makes you laugh. He's the only one that makes you cry, and everything else in between. Subhanahu wa ta'ala. We spoke about this. So laughing and crying a little bit more. We talked about humans are the only ones to do both. What's the point of laughing and crying? SubhanAllah, when I was reading, this is I think it was Razi. Again, this is several hundred years ago, before Darwinism or anything even came up as a theory. Back then they had what they used to call these people, they call them naturalists almost. So their thing was, and similar ideas exist today, that we're human beings, just like any other animal. We live, we die, and then that's it. وَمَا يُهْلِكُنَا إِلَّا الدَّهْرِ. It's in the Quran, and nothing destroys us except time. There is no afterlife, we're just part of the system. So what he brings up in his thing is, if everything is like animals, everything leads to their one goal is to reproduce and survive. If we're just like that, where does laughing and crying fit in? Right? If we're just like any other animal and our purpose is just to reproduce and survive and continue our lineage, how does laughing and crying play into any of that? So if you believe in evolution and all these things, it doesn't make any sense. This is not a trait that allows you to live any more or get any kind of advantage. So where does that come from? Another thing is, laughing and crying can't be controlled by you. You can fake laugh and fake cry, sure, but if it's genuine, you can't control it. If something funny happens and you can't hold your laughter, you're going to laugh. If something makes you sad, you're going to cry. You're not in control of that. And the fact that it's part of you and you have no control of it is in itself a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala highlights those two things. وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَضْحَكَ وَأَبْكَى. These two things that are so intimately part of you, yet you have no control over them. He is the one. The final thing, and this is very beautiful, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَضْحَكَ وَأَبْكَى, that He is the one who makes and cry. This doesn't indicate a sequence. It can also mean both at the same time. And want us to think about, maybe if you haven't experienced this, you've seen this, if a mother or somebody that loves somebody very much, and they see them after a long time at the airport or whatever it is, you go back to where you immigrated from, or somebody comes here and you haven't seen them in years and years. What do? If you look at the airport and look around, people are hugging each other, they're laughing, but they're also crying. It doesn't make sense. They're laughing and crying at the same time. And this, subhanAllah, وَأَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى, that one day you will meet your Lord. And if you live this life right, that meeting will be you laughing and crying at the same time. Because it will be like going back to that place that you missed so much, that you didn't even know. وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَضْحَكَ وَأَبْكَى. That emotion will be what it will be like when وَأَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of that. Just some other meanings for completion's sake that the tafsir mentioned, that He is the one that makes laugh in Jannah and crying in hellfire. Because in the dunya, everybody's laughing and crying for everything. There's no distinction. Over there will be. Right? It's talking about hearts, that the hearts of the believers, when you realize the truth, when I said from this, when we realize that this is Quran, this is the word of Allah, you may be Muslim all your life, but never actually realize that. When you realize that, your heart is laughing. But if that's not there, your heart is crying because you're missing out on this book. You're missing out on what life is about. Another interpretation that this beautiful imagery that the clouds are crying with rain and the earth laughs. So like our mouth kind of opens up when we laugh, the mouth opens up and the plants come forth. Another meaning of وَأَنَّهُ أَضْحَكَ وَأَبْكَى. The last thing that we'll focus on is the sequence. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, أَضْحَكَ وَأَبْكَى. Laughing comes first, right? Not وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَبْكَى وَأَضْحَكَ. The laughing comes first. So joy is the base. The joy is our base, right? And then the laughing, the crying is what comes next. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of His mercy, has made it like that. This is, I made sure to put it here, this is just one of my own thoughts that I had, because we mentioned that the understanding now is that other animals laugh, but only humans cry. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions وَأَنَّهُ أَضْحَكَ, and then if anybody is trying to be smart and says, well, this monkey laughs too, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala وَأَبْكَى. Well, no, nothing else cries. That's us, the humans. Subhanahu wa ta'ala. Moving on. وَأَنَّهُ, and I do encourage, for the sake of time, it almost feels wrong to just run through this quickly, but to really internalize this, spend some time with this, because these are very short but very powerful ayat that we do have to sit with and internalize to really get the full effect of it. And then we move from that to وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَمَاتَ وَأَحْيَا. And He is the one, again, أَنَّهُ هُوَ, He is the only one who gives death and He gives life. أَمَاتَ وَأَحْيَا. And this we now know already. The only new words are amata, which is to give death, and ahya, which is to give life, right? So this can mean literal life or death. As we all know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us life, and then He causes us to die, and then He will bring us up again on the Day of Judgment. And it can also be figurative, because if your heart is opening up to this, if your heart is opening up to the Quran, that's Him giving your heart life. But if your heart is closed off to this, huwa amata wa ahya, that's also Him closing off your heart. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. Some of the Tafsir write also, every night you go to sleep and then you wake up in the morning. That's a minor form of life and death. And that is a reminder for us as well, that one day it's going to be like this, but when I wake up, it's going to be the Day of Judgment. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. Interesting thing here is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about Himself. He mentions laughing and crying before He mentions literal life and death. So He talks about adhaka wa abka before He talks about life and death. And one of the wisdoms behind this is He highlights the human experience, right? Laughing and crying and every other emotion that you feel in between, that's what this life is about. That's where your heart is, right? The life and death of the heart, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that first. That's where the laughing and crying come in. If your heart is dead, then whether you're literally alive or dead doesn't really even matter anymore. Are you fulfilling what you're here to do? Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala moves on, وَأَنَّهُ خَلَقَ الزَّوْجَيْنِ الذَّكَرَ وَالْأُنثَى. And then He creates the pairs, الزَّوْجَيْن, ذَكَرَ وَالْأُنثَى. We covered this. خَلَقَ is a new word, but I think many of us know what that means. Created, right? So He created. الزَّوْجَيْن, it means the two pairs. الذَّكَر, we did this. أَلَكُمُ الذَّكَرُ وَلَهُ الْأُنثَى. Dhakar is male. And then untha obviously would be female, mashallah. وَأَنَّهُ خَلَقَ الزَّوْجَيْنِ الذَّكَرَ وَالْأُنثَى. Again, that connection back to, even the same words are being used, back to the beginning of the surah. So, one of the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is building up this argument. And also one thing to remember here, everything else before was what? وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَضْحَكَ وَأَبْكَى وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَمَاتَ وَأَحْيَا. What's missing here? Huwa. There's no emphasis here. So the reason they write this is because some about laughter and crying. If somebody is trying to argue, none of these are good arguments, which is why I put them in quotation marks. But people can say things that don't make sense. But let's say we talked about laughter and crying, and somebody says that Allah doesn't have to make me laugh or cry. Somebody can tell me a joke, I'll laugh. Somebody can be mean to me and I'll cry. Okay, we won't even try to put that apart. We move on to the next one. وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَمَاتَ وَأَحْيَا. We bring the example of Ibrahim alayhi salam with the tyrant when he said he brought a person and said kill this person, and then he brought another person and said let this person live, and he tells Ibrahim alayhi salam, I give life and I give death. So that can be the argument, right? Somebody can say people do that themselves via medicine. You give somebody, let somebody live, you kill them. So how's that unique? But خَلَقَ الزَّوْجَيْنِ الذَّكَرَ وَالْأُنثَى, creating man and woman from a drop. Can anyone even claim to do that? No. Nobody can even claim to bring that. So because this argument has no answer, the huwa is missing. This doesn't require any emphasis because there's no rebuttal to it. So when there can be a potential argument, وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ, there's that extra emphasis. Now there is no room for a rebuttal because you can't answer this one. The huwa is gone. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I don't even need to emphasize this because you yourself have no answer against this. وَأَنَّهُ خَلَقَ الزَّوْجَيْنِ الذَّكَرَ وَالْأُنثَى مِن نُطْفَةٍ إِذَا تُمْنَى, from a sperm drop when it is poured. مِن نُطْفَةٍ إِذَا تُمْنَى. Min means what? Do you remember? From. MashaAllah. Nutfa means a sperm drop. إِذَا means when. Tumna means to emit, it emitted. Min nutfatin idha tumna. So he created the male and female. Min nutfatin idha tumna. One thing to think about here is something as complex as us. Something as complex as us that laughs and cries and we experience all these emotions. Forget about everything else. Just instead of all of physiology, let's focus on these two things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke about, laughing and crying. Something that can experience all this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates from min nutfatin idha tumna, from a single drop. So we live in a time where a lot of complex things are being created. AI is a thing. People have AI, people have things, this laptop. A lot of complex things are being created, but it's always created from something that's also complex. If you want to build this laptop, you need so many different things to come and put it together, right? AI, data centers now, that's the whole debate, that we need these data centers to have AI. There's so many things that we're proud, and we have so much pride in making now, but at the end of the day, to make it is a whole nother issue of complexity. We make complex things from complex things, and we have pride in that as human beings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this thing that I've created that laughs and cries and everything in between. Not only that, it's dhakar wal untha. There's two kinds. There's a male and a female, and they also have their own tendencies. Some of the reading I was doing for this, they said wa adhaka wa abka. The male and female experiences these emotions differently. They cry and laugh. The proportions are different. All this complexity came from what? Min nutfatin idha tumna, from that single drop. You can make complex things, but can you do it from that? From min nutfatin idha tumna. The other thing is this, obviously, is almost an uncomfortable thing to talk about, right? Maybe even when I was reading it, all of us felt a little bit embarrassed, uncomfortable to say these things, right? That's not an accident, because this is Quran. Every single word is used on purpose. So let's talk about that. Why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring this up now? Why make us feel a little uncomfortable now? Because in this surah, we see human beings reach the highest of highs, right? We talked about وَأَنَّ سَعْيَهُ سَوْفَ يُرَى, that you put in your work here, and then on the Day of Judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so proud of you that He's showing off to the angels, He's showing off to other humanity that look, this is my slave, this is how proud I am of him, right? We spoke about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam going from earth to the heavens. So this surah is very much about people that are achieving all these great things, but it is also the surah of وَلَا تُزَكُّوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Don't think that you're something. Your beginning is still this, right? No matter how high you think you got, no matter how high, you're reading the surah and you're like, wow, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has really honored me. I have something to feel proud of. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings you right back down. Min nutfatin idha tumna. No, this is actually where you come from. Even if you get all these things, you're still coming from here. And then tying back to the beginning, what did we say? فَلِلَّهِ الْآخِرَةُ وَالْأُولَى. To Allah is the ending and the beginning. That was in the beginning of the surah. Now we're at the end of the surah. And akhiratu wal ula, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this is your beginning. Here at the end of the surah is your beginning. This drop. This is where you started. And in the beginning, we were talking about that elevation of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam being at that highest level. So in so many ways, the surah is like wrapping it around one another. One thing to just note here is that this is one man, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, saying this off the top of his head, not organizing it. He's not sitting down and writing this goes here, this goes here. He's just saying this as it comes. And this is the level of complexity it has, subhanAllah. One of the purposes of this is to realize that nobody except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can speak like this. And I hope some of that is getting through, inshallah. وَأَنَّ عَلَيْهِ النَّشْأَةَ الْأُخْرَى. And it is upon him to bring about another creation. وَأَنَّ عَلَيْهِ النَّشْأَةَ الْأُخْرَى. وَأَنَّ is and that. عَلَيْهِ, do we know? Upon him, mashallah. Upon him. So we did this one. Do you remember where? الذين يجتنبون الكبائر الإثم إلى اللمم إن ربك واسع المغفرة هو أعلم بكم إذ أنشأكم من الأرض. So that إذ أنشأكم من الأرض, that's where this النشأة comes from. It means bringing forth. وأن عليه النشأة الأخرى. أخرى we also did another. SubhanAllah, in this ayah there's no new words. So if we're keeping up this ayah, you should be able to look at and get a rough idea of what it's talking about. So first thing, again, going back to earlier on in the surah, wrapping things up. وَأَنَّ عَلَيْهِ النَّشْأَةَ الْأُخْرَى هُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِكُمْ إِذْ أَنْشَأَكُم مِّنَ الْأَرْضِ. He knew you, as we spoke about when we did that verse, He knew you when He brought you forth from the earth, from dirt. He knew about you then. And just like He did that then, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses that same exact word, وَأَنَّ عَلَيْهِ النَّشْأَةَ الْأُخْرَى. He's going to bring you forth one more time. It's going to happen again, right? He made you from a drop, مِن نُطْفَةٍ إِذَا تُمْنَى, and this dirt, وَأَنَّ عَلَيْهِ نَشْأَةَ الْأُخْرَى. And He's going to bring you forth again. وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَغْنَى وَأَقْنَى. And He is the one who gives wealth and preserves it. We're going to talk about this a little bit. Now we're back to, subhanAllah, we're back to the وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ. Because when we're talking about wealth and preserving it, I can say, oh, I go out and get a job. I'm providing for myself. I have this business, I have that business, I provide for myself. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts the huwa back in there. How exact the speech is. Every single letter, every single word is in its place. Nothing is by accident. وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَغْنَى وَأَقْنَى. And indeed He, Aghna means to make somebody independent. So Al-Ghani is the name of Allah, means independent. Aghna means to make somebody else independent. وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَغْنَى وَأَقْنَى. Aqna means to make permanent. It can have other meanings as well, we'll talk about, but for now, وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَغْنَى وَأَقْنَى. And indeed He is the one who makes independent and then He gives permanence to that independence. So the general idea is He decides, subhanahu wa ta'ala, who gets more and who gets less in this dunya. And whenever we talk about getting more and getting less, it goes back to effort. وَأَنَّ سَعْيَهُ سَوْفَ يَرَى وَأَنْ لَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. So He'll decide who gets what, but you have to put in that effort. And He already spoke about that. That laughing and crying. He's going to decide who gets more of what. Some people's lives are more laughter than crying. Some people's lives are more crying. Everybody has a mix, but some are more than others. He is the one that decides that, subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَغْنَى. So He makes you self-sufficient from others. He makes you independent. The obvious thing to think about, which this includes, is wealth. Right? So He gives you enough that you don't have to go asking other people. But this doesn't just mean wealth. It can mean knowledge, right? And this can actually be a bad thing. You may become so that you think you don't need to know anything else. I know all there is to know. I'm aghna. I don't need any more knowledge. So that's a bad thing, right? But it can also be a good thing in terms like social pressure. There's all these pressures. I have to keep up with this. I have to have this car. I have to have this house. Why? Because what's so-and-so going to say? What's so-and-so going to say about my car? What's so-and-so going to say about my house? But He can make it so that you don't have a need for any of this. I don't care what somebody thinks of me anymore. Aghna, I am ghani. He's made me ghani. I don't care what you think about my car. I don't think what you think about my house. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that gives that to you. Wa aqna has a couple of different meanings. So the first meaning we said was He perseveres it. We'll go into that. Another meaning of this is He makes content. So you can have independence. You can be in a position where you don't have to ask anybody for anything, but you can still be unhappy. We all agree with this. You can still be very unhappy. But He can give you that independence, وَأَقْنَى, and He gives you contentment. He makes you not unhappy. He makes you free from everybody else, but He also makes you content with that. وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَغْنَى وَأَقْنَى. The other meaning is He makes it lasting. He gives you a means for that independence to keep coming. One of the tafsir say, أَعْنَى بِالذَّهَبِ وَالْفِضَّةِ وَصُنُوفِ الْأَمْوَالِ. So أَغْنَى means that for gold and silver and different kinds of wealth. So that's أَغْنَى. وَأَقْنَى بِالْإِبْلِ وَالْبَقَرِ وَالْغَنَمِ. And أَقْنَى is means like a camel or a cow or sheep. So something that can actually continuously provide that wealth. So that's the difference that they make. In another tafsir it said He gives you children that are going to continue whatever you have going on. But the long story short is it's something worth holding on to. So He gives you that independence, and He makes it something that's actually worth holding on to. Another meaning is وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَغْنَى. He makes you independent here. And أَقْنَى, which means lasting, He'll do that for you in the hereafter. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of those people. And the other meaning that this has is actually the exact opposite, withholding, right? And that would fit with the theme of what we've seen so far. Amata wahiya, adhaka wa abka. And that would fit in with that he gives and he withholds, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And finally, it can also mean that he makes himself self-sufficient. He's made himself self-sufficient of us. He doesn't need anything from us, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Instead, it's us that are dependent on him, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as we said before, it doesn't mean one of these is right and one of these is wrong, but rather all of these kind of fit in their own way. Last ayah for today, وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ رَبُّ الشِّعْرَى. This one is quite amazing, so we'll spend a little bit of time. And he is the Lord of Shi'ra. Shi'ra means Sirius. Sirius is a star, and we're going to talk about it a little bit. I actually register, we're all here. When I was memorizing this ayah, this is years ago, I remember I came to this verse and I looked up what it means, and I was in college at the time. وَأَنَّهُ رَبُّ الشِّعْرَى. And the first thing I did, I looked up at the sky, and you can see it. So I want everybody, in the summer especially, it's very easy to see, and you can see it. And I want you to think of this verse, وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ رَبُّ الشِّعْرَى. So, the Arabic we're all very comfortable with now. Shi'ra is the only new word. It means Sirius. If you look at the sky, the easiest thing, the brightest star you see is going to be Sirius. You don't need a telescope, you don't need anything. If you look at the sky, maybe not around here, but if you're in, deeper in Long Island or upstate, it's very easy to see. وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ رَبُّ الشِّعْرَى. Why bring this up now? So it's the brightest star in the night sky. This is the oldest known star. I don't mean that it's the oldest star in existence, but this is, as far back as you go of ancient civilizations, they talk about this star. Practically because it's the easiest one to see, so they talk about it. What's amazing about it is every civilization has some kind of thing talking about the worship of the star. So now we're going to 3,000 years before Isa alayhi salam. They used to worship the star. They used to call it the goddess of fertility, right? It was one of their gods that they worshipped. In ancient Greece, now this is 800 years before. They used to say that this star is responsible for the hot days in summer. Rome, 500 years ago, they said they used to sacrifice animals, wines, food, all to this star here, Ash-Shi'ra. In Arabia, of course, and this is what the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is talking to, they used to also worship this star, some certain tribes. To this day, this tribe in Mali, in West Africa, this is the whole cornerstone of their religion, is this one star. Even more interesting, a lot of these ancient religions believed that this star was actually heaven. So they looked up at the sky and they saw this star and they believed it was heaven, and they thought that one day they were going to go back there. وَأَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى. They told themselves that one day they were going to go back there. The reason this is amazing, another thing, the pyramids. So in Egypt, the pyramids, they're actually built to be lined up with this star, Ash-Shi'ra. So every civilization to this day, when they find it, one way or another, part of their religion has to do with this star. Now the question is, what does the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ know about any of this? He's somebody that's never left Mecca. He's somebody that's never really, even if he was familiar with the civilizations at his time, what about 3,000 years ago? What about 2,000 years ago? 3,000 years ago before Isa alayhi salam. What does he know about this? But now he's standing in this marketplace, and this surah so far talks about Lat, talks about Uzza, talks about the Quraysh's idols, and this surah breaks down that system. And now to end, this surah is attacking shirk as a whole throughout all time, throughout all people. It gets to the core of it through Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that has no way of knowing any of this. Subhanallah. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then in one of the tafsir says, one of the interesting things about أَوَّلَ مَنْ عَبَدَهُ Abu Kabsha. So from the Arabs, the first one to worship this star was somebody named Abu Kabsha, Ahadu Ajdadi Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and he was actually from min qibali ummahati. From his mother's side, he was actually one of the Prophet's great grandfathers. From his mother's side, not from his father's side. وَلِذَلِكَ كَانَ مُشْرِكُ قُرَيْشِ يُسَمُّونَ النَّبِي صلى الله عليه وسلم ibn Abi Kabsha. So because of this, the Quraysh used to make fun of him, the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and call him Ibn Abi Kabsha, the son of Abi Kabsha. حين دعا إلى الله وَخَالَفَ أَدْيَانَهُمْ. So when he left their religion and started, and in their view started a new religion, which we now know it's not, وَقَالُوا مَا لَقِينَا مِنْ إِبْنِ أَبِي كَبْشَةٍ. And they used to say, kind of making fun of him, that مَا لَقِينَا مِنْ إِبْنِ أَبِي كَبْشَةٍ, that what did the son of Abu Kabsha bring us? So they're kind of poking fun at him, that your grandfather on your mother's side came up with this religion of worshipping the star, and now you're talking about all these things. What did you really bring? And now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addressing that, وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ رَبُّ الشِّعْرَى. But on a broader scale, every instance of shirk from the beginning to now to the future, whatever, is being attacked by this one ayah. وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ رَبُّ الشِّعْرَى. It's this miraculous tying together multiple events, multiple timelines that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has no way of knowing. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings it all together here. And on a final point, and this exists even today, a lot of people, a lot of the things we talk about, laughing, crying, being rich, being poor, you can go right now probably someplace not far from here and find somebody that's going to claim to look at the stars and tell you if you're going to be rich, if you're going to be poor, if you're going to be laughing or crying. A lot of what we talked about, people are attributing to stars. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no, even the brightest one that you see, ash-shi'ra, وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ رَبُّ الشِّعْرَى. That's all for today. We'll just do a quick review. وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ رَبُّ الشِّعْرَى. Okay, because shi'ra was itself the what they used to worship, right? So it's emphasizing that He is the Lord of shi'ra. So that is why the emphasis is there. وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ رَبُّ الشِّعْرَى. That's a great question, mashallah. So this is where we started today. وَأَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى. So continuing from last week, and indeed, and that with your Lord is the final return. وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَضْحَكَ وَأَبْكَى. And indeed, He is the one that makes laugh, and He is the one that makes cry. وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَمَاتَ وَأَحْيَا. And He is the one that gives life, He is the one that gives death. وَأَنَّهُ خَلَقَ الزَّوْجَيْنِ الذَّكَرَ وَالْأُنْثَى. He's the one that creates the pairs, the male and the female, مِن نُطْفَةٍ إِذَا تُمْنَى, from a sperm drop as it falls. وَأَنَّ عَلَيْهِ النَّشْأَةَ الْأُخْرَى. And upon Him is that He's going to bring you forth again. وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَغْنَى وَأَقْنَى. And He's the one who gives independence and gives permanence. وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ رَبُّ الشِّعْرَى. And He is the one who is alone the Lord of ash-shi'ra. These are the sources, as usual. If you do want to kind of look into more of this stuff, this last one is in English, and it's available to everybody, and it's also available in the handouts from the WhatsApp group that I shared. That is all for today. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us understanding. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun ala